Hi everyone, I'm Dion Schuddeboom and this is the Apple Watch Series 7. In this video, I'm going to walk you through everything that is new, as well as show you how I use the watch day to day, and finally answer the question of whether it is worth buying or upgrading to the Apple Watch Series 7. And this will all come from the perspective of someone who's upgraded to the Series 7 from the Series 3. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so I opted to go for the smaller 41mm version, as I found this size to look more proportionate on my wrist, looking more like a watch rather than a computer. And then in terms of color, I opted to go for the midnight version, as this is actually the darkest color that Apple provides this year. And the reason I went for the darker color is, in my experience, the darker colors are easier to pair with a range of outfits, going from more formal to casual wear. At the end of the day, my advice would be to, if you have the chance, go to an Apple store where you can try the different sizes as well as the color options in person to ultimately find what suits you best. Speaking of which, I'm curious to hear, do you already have an Apple Watch? And if so, what color or model do you use? I'd love to hear from you in the comments. So without further ado, let's take a closer look at the Series 7. So the single biggest upgrade that the Series 7 gets is in the display, so I'll start there. Compared to last year's Series 6, the display is now 20% larger, and compared to the Series 3, it is a full 50% larger. Now these numbers are significant, and I can tell you from day-to-day use, the difference is immediately noticeable. And what is important here is that despite having a larger display, Apple have kept the physical dimensions of the watch mostly the same, so this 41mm Series 7 looks very similar on my wrist compared to the 38mm Series 3. And this is thanks to having much smaller display bezels on the Series 7. And I can tell you from day-to-day use, this really helps make the watch feel and look more modern, and allows for content on the screen to be pushed further out, showing more at a time. So to give an example of this, Apple now includes a full-size QWERTY keyboard right on the watch. Now at first this may look comically small, but in practice and with the help of predictive text, it's actually quite usable. Although personally, I still find myself using Siri to dictate text most of the time. Layered on top of this display is a new front crystal, which is now 50% thicker, which should make the watch more durable as well as more crack resistant. And then if you look closely at the edge of the display, you can see there's this subtle wraparound effect, and this is created by the light refracted from the edge of the display. Now, while this adds no practical functionality to the watch, as someone who used to wear analog watches, I gotta say I like this feature. To me, it adds a bit of depth to the watch and makes it look a little bit more high-end. Speaking of depth, the Series 7 is water resistant at up to 50 meters, so to say you can wear it out in the rain would be an understatement. The Series 7 also gets a few exclusive watch faces, including the contour face that I'm using right now. And I think it looks good. It really emphasizes the size of the display. Next is Modular Duo, letting you have more complications at once on screen. This is great if you want to see lots of data at a glance. Though on most days, I find myself using the GMT watch face, as I like to have the smaller complications in the corners of the display, and then I like that little touch of color that comes with this watch face. So the Series 7 has an always-on display that we also saw in the Series 6 as well as the Series 5. Now as someone who's coming from the Series 3, this was my first time having an always-on display, and I have to say I love it. Just the other day, I was in a very long meeting, and instead of having to not so subtly turn my arm, I could just look at my wrist on the table, subtly glance down, and see the time. And to put it simply, I think it just looks better having something on the display at all times, rather than having just a black screen on your wrist. What was important to me as well is that the brightness of the always-on display is managed very well, getting both bright enough to clearly see outdoors, but then also dim enough to not distract in the evening, only turning up the brightness when looking at the watch directly. Coming from the Series 3, I was curious to see if the always-on display would affect battery. So how does the battery life perform? In my week of testing, I was happy to see that the battery life on the Series 7 was very similar to what I got on the Series 3, which is to say that it could get me through a whole day with around 30% remaining. Now, do bear in mind that your battery life will really depend on what settings and features you use. For example, depending on how I set up my Series 7, I could get anywhere from 9 all the way to 35 hours of use. I have a more thorough guide in the works which shows you in detail how exactly I've set up my Series 7 to get the most out of features as well as battery life. I typically charge my watch in the morning as I get ready for the day. And during this 30 to 45 minute period, my Series 7 can charge from roughly 30% all the way up to 90, being more than enough to get me through the whole day. And this is thanks to the new fast charging found on the Series 7. The included magnetic puck will actually charge the watch up to 33% faster, where an 8-minute charge will give you 8 hours of sleep tracking. Speaking of sleep tracking, the Series 7 is packed full of health features as well as sensors. It can measure your blood oxygen, take an ECG, continuously measure your heart rate, and track workouts, everything from an outdoor run to swimming laps in a pool, even reminding you to stand after an hour of sitting. I use one or more of these health features every day. Speaking of how I use the watch day to day, let me give you a quick breakdown of some of my favorite features and what I use most on my Series 7. First, receiving notifications on my Apple Watch is excellent. I keep my phone on silent and receive the important notifications right on my wrist through the excellent taptic feedback, which feels kind of like a gentle tap on your wrist. Now, I did say that I only have the important notifications come in through my wrist, as if I were to let all of my notifications come in, it will get a bit much. So my suggestion here is to go to the Watch app on your phone and manually select which app specifically you want to allow to send notifications to your watch. For example, I only allow calls and messages. That way I know that when I get a notification, it is something important. Although not the best digital assistant, having Siri on my wrist is incredibly useful. I use Siri throughout the day to set reminders, add a calendar event, or even send a quick message, or simply set a timer while cooking. Siri on the Series 7 is quick and very responsive. Maps too is great on the Series 7. The larger display makes it easy to find yourself on the map and use turn-by-turn directions, especially if you're walking or biking. When it comes to staying active, having an Apple Watch, especially the new Series 7, for me has really been a motivating tool to have. As a goal-oriented person, I find the activity rings to be a great motivating tool to ensure I get some exercise every day, trying to complete as many of those rings as possible. Having a wide range of health data from heart health to blood oxygen levels to even walking speed, even for me as someone who is healthy, it is reassuring to have and also fascinating to look at every once in a while. Now, you may think that maps, Siri, notifications, sending messages, these are all things I can already do on my iPhone. And that is true, but that's also not what this is about. The Apple Watch is about adding convenience to the things you already do every day. And for me, using my Apple Watch every day, it makes many of these tasks easier and more time efficient, ultimately allowing me to get more done in the day. It is these more underrated features that for me make the Apple Watch worth having, and the Apple Watch Series 7 represents the best of what Apple has to offer. Okay, so now that we've talked about everything you need to know about the Series 7, let's talk about whether it's worth upgrading. The Series 3 was my first Apple Watch, and it let me experience the benefits of having a smartwatch. That said, if you have a Series 3, I think that the Series 7 provides a big enough step up in all the key aspects to warrant a reasonable upgrade. On the other hand, if you're coming from an SE or a Series 5, it gets a little bit more difficult. Now, if you simply want the latest and greatest, then by all means, the Series 7 will deliver. its bigger and better display on its own will provide a substantial upgrade, especially if you're coming from the SE, which doesn't have that always-on display. Otherwise, I would say the SE and Series 5 are still capable watches that should still receive a few years of software updates and support. If you are a first-time Apple Watch buyer and you're not yet sure whether the Apple Watch is right for you, then my advice would be to start with the SE, as this will provide a more affordable option with decent specs as well as features. If on the other hand you want an upgrade, wanting the latest and greatest, or already know that the Apple Watch is for you, then going for the Series 7 will not disappoint. Hopefully this can help you out with your buying decision. Be sure to leave a like down below and subscribe for more content like this. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching and take care.